The music industry in the UK has had a very, very long past. And indeed, we've had quite a good past and good run indeed for the music industry itself here in the UK. But unfortunately, like a lot of industries, especially during the coronavirus, any industry that has a live sort of element or an in-person interaction has been suffering a lot. And it's not just the music industry, but theatres as well have seen huge impacts on their potential business, and in many cases the question of their ability to even reopen. So it's really shocking that once again our government does not seem to be overly interested in helping support what is a really vital cultural element for our country, as well as being a key part to our economy. After all, a dinner and a show in London is probably one of the most biggest touristy things that people do and go down to London for in the UK. But if there's no show, well, what's the point of going down to London then? Maybe to see the sights, but hey, you've got what? Wicked, Phantom of the Opera, Les Mis. Just to think of the couple of the big three off the top of my head and down on the West End that are constantly filling out every single night. And then you've got all like the little smaller theatres and the back alley places that might only fit like 20 other people, where a lot of like theatre people get their starts, and not just theatre people but musicians as well. We could see a huge impact on our music industry, especially during the pandemic. And I think that the government not even showing the least bit of interest in trying to support that industry just shows you how much really they don't care. And especially the fact that they love to bang on about cultural stuff and how important UK culture is. You'd think that they would probably be paying a lot of attention to something that is really a cultural touchstone in the UK. Music. Music is hugely important to any culture, but of course the Conservatives really don't care, because they do not care about the arts in general, because unfortunately the arts tends to be quite a lefty thing. So before we jump into today's article, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, as well as one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you to all the people who do support the channel that way. And on with the article. So this comes from the Yorkshire Bylines, and the title is, "Our Music Industry is Struggling, but We Can Be Heroes." The twin calamities of COVID and Brexit are hollowing out much of our once thriving live music industry. The situation for non-classical genres of music is well publicised. The biggest names in UK popular music are currently lobbying very noisily for rescue measures to be negotiated with what was, until the 1st of January, our first huge home market of over 400 million people with the single market of the EU. Rescue, however, isn't too strong a word either. Touring plans for bands aren't just megastars across the EU. They are now likely to mean that they are much more loss-making ventures at best, and for many of the elderly career musicians, impossible. The barriers are multiple: visas, haulage, carbonage restrictions, carnets, and for equipment and instruments, VAT declarations in and out, special certificates for rare or animal-based materials, proof of contracts, health repudiations, vehicle insurance, and so on. All of this haunts our industry as we try and recover from the damage that COVID has done. And with the last-minute exemptions to lockdown restrictions, the nightmare of already planned summer concerts, festivals and shows is now facing a total shutdown. It is doubly galling that these extended restrictions are avoidable if the government had not, for purely political reasons, kept India off the red list for 22 days after the Delta variant had been identified as a new threat. However, the once lucrative touring pop sector is only one side of the coin. On the other, there are thousands of highly skilled professional players and singers you won't have even have heard of, who until January plied their trade working across borders, often at short notice, on long-term contracts in theatres, classical concert halls, dance venues, TV stations, recording studios and opera houses. The UK alone doesn't provide enough work for this large, bustling sector, and the single market's freedom of movement meant there are musicians, actors, dancers, singers, players, designers, specialist audio, video technicians were amongst the busiest, if not most sought after, most flexible, and most hired of all of Europe's nations. Tens of thousands of livings were made this way. Families housed, children raised, taxes paid, and communities enriched. That work has completely disappeared overnight. It turns out that our unelected bureaucrat, oh the irony, Lord Frost, left the entire creative sector, our second biggest export industry after the financial services, out of his lengthy, detailed negotiations on the trade and cooperation agreements, promises that this glaringly, deeply irresponsible omission would be rectified retrospectively, as the government priority seems to have been meaningless as well delusional as their assurances on protecting care homes from the pandemic and providing enough personal protective equipment for nurses and or, of course, the farming fisheries getting their better deal outside the EU than in it. Berlin, Paris and Amsterdam will be the new music hubs for the vast international European market, once dominated by London. Anyone who's been watching Netflix or BBC4 in the past few years will have noticed the Europeanization of TV content and co-production. We used to be part of that fairly easy. Fruitful, red tape-free, collaborative enterprises with our neighbours and performers of all disciplines flowed to and from across the Europe and international borders, and everyone benefited. Not for us and not anymore. Whatever temporary sticking plasters and fixes may be cobbled together, they will maybe just not be enough for cross-channel touring and trying to restart the post-COVID, or to make it slightly less easier for classical musicians with instruments to travel given the concerns of different locations, or to be able to undertake contract work over 3 weeks or months rather than the odd day. The truth is that the wrecking ball has done the damage to our industry that we inevitably will shrink and struggle. Thousands of skilled jobs will be lost, livelihoods will be choked off by the ill-thought experiment of Brexit that will also lead to then a talent drain where international travel resumes in its certainty. In the short to medium term, this will be our lot. Looking further ahead though, it is likely that the younger generation will seek to reverse Brexit, perhaps within 15 years or so, and any remotely sane Prime Minister would rejoin the customs union even sooner. So it is imperative that in the following years to come that we keep up cultural exchanges alive between the UK and its closest neighbours and allies in a holding pattern, not a retreat. Such a rapprochement is not going to come from the government, but on behalf of the next generation of Britons. It is our duty, I believe, to keep the door open as much as possible and to keep alive some of the positive alternative relations with the EU to member states, to counteract the poisonous anti-European bile trotted out by Downing Street at the behest of their client press and headline writers, if nothing else. Whilst our Brexit struggle in the creative sector is portrayed primarily as an economic one, on account of its large sector's contributions to export value and its employment, over 2 million people in the UK, and providing equal economic underpinning to the wider tourism industry, there is a bigger issue at stake that is simply not economic. It is winning the hearts and minds so that we are not cut off from our neighbours, families and friends in the EU, so that younger Britons in particular are not left trapped in a pariah state until such time as they can remove the clique that forced this upon them from office. This drunken, bleary-eyed Brexit government will sooner or later implode, and its support will wither, as a mighty hangover of broken promises engulfs it. Maybe not this year or next, but it will falter. Until that time though, the arts can demonstrate to our European neighbours that we are not the same as our government, and that we seek friendship and collaboration and cultural exchange, even if the Brexit mandarins do not. Most of all, we must help to prepare for a very different future led by a younger generation. A generation that is profoundly less xenophobic, less nationalistic, and less conceived that trading relations with tens of thousands of miles away makes less environmental sense than enamoured of oligarchs of the far more ease with diversity and cultural openness than the crooks and charlatans that have brought to us this divided and unhappy place. So let us find whatever ways we can to make music for which our neighbours across the Brexit wall will one day, like Berlin's Wall, be razed to the ground, to the loud and joyful accompaniment of Beethoven's Ode to Joy and Bowie's Heroes. And I sort of do agree, and I really do sympathise with a lot of people in the creative industry. Like I say, I used to work in, when I first started my working life after leaving uni, I worked in a lot of TV stuff, so I know a lot of people in the creative industries, and they themselves are really worried about the opportunities to be able to go back to work. I know one guy who was an editor who he's constantly flying out to like Austria, Germany, the Netherlands to do literally like a couple of days of work, but that is now gone from them. So there's very, very real lives, of course, will be affected. And like I say, sooner or later, he is right. The government promised so much to so many people during Brexit, and we're already seeing that they can't keep these promises. They broke them to the DUP, they broke them to the fishermen, they broke them to the farmers. We've seen them breaking it to the steel industry. The litany of broken promises will sooner or later catch up, not only to Boris Johnson, but this entire Brexit government. And even the Conservatives that were pushed out by this hard right Brexit coup in the non-parliamentary Conservative Party also know that the damage is being done as well. So the idea of a future Conservative Prime Minister rejoining the customs union is really not that too much of a shock, or it's not a fantasy. It is very much a possible reality, because remember, it was the Conservatives who got us into the at the time the EEC in the first place, and then continued to agree to a lot of being in Europe because they could see the economic advantage, while it was the Brexiteers who were always in the wilderness, shouting out about it until it became the big thing. And of course, Nigel Farage made it all about immigration. And of course, we are where we are today. And of course, the reasons for Brexit are vast and variousness. There's never really truly one reason. But like I say, I do hope the music industry does recover, because, like I say, it's one of our biggest export markets next to our, service industry sector. It's the creative sector itself, not just the music industry, is set, fingers crossed, hopefully, to have a good recovery session. If not, then I've said before, 2022 and 2023 are not going to be good years for a whole lot of people. And I really do worry, because you're seeing a lot of people, a lot of countries start to recover and enter their COVID recovery phase. And even though we're still far behind where a lot of these other countries are. And of course, that all comes down to Brexit and the fact that our government are completely useless. And the sooner, hopefully, people realise that and get them out, the more quickly we can get back to, making things work properly again in this country. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support me. And as always, thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you all next time.